Today's project is a 2004 Toyota Corolla with some trouble codes, as you can see here. So some quick online research will tell you that the 2003 to 2008 Toyota Matrix and Corollas have issues with the intake manifold gaskets going bad and causing vacuum leaks. That will cause misfires at idle. It'll also cause a lean code to set as well. As you saw in the beginning of this video, we had cylinders 1 through 4 misfiring, as well as a P0300 random misfire, and the lean code all set in the ECM. That tells me that most likely the intake manifold gasket is leaking. But before we throw parts at it, let's diagnose it and make sure that's exactly what's going on. So to get to the intake manifold easier, I'm going to take this little cover off. Eventually, off comes the cover, and as you can see, now we've got easy access to the intake manifold. If you're a new subscriber of mine, you probably haven't seen the video, but if you've been around for a while, you probably have. I had a Cadillac that also set a lean code, and it turned out to be a leaking throttle body gasket. The way that I'm going to find the intake leak on this Toyota is the exact same way. So what I'll do is I'll run the engine, and I'm going to spray brake clean along the intake manifold here where it meets the cylinder head. This is just a simple can of brake clean. You don't need anything expensive. You can get them at most any auto parts stores. Now I believe I've found the problem. Notice as I spray around the intake manifold port of cylinder number 1, how the engine speed changes slightly. Not by much, but it's just enough to tell me that there's a leak in here somewhere. And here's just a little shot of the live data. As I was spraying the brake clean around the intake manifold, these numbers ran steady. These numbers should fluctuate back and forth from high to low like they're doing right now. When I was spraying brake clean around the intake manifold, these numbers ran steady, indicating that it wasn't fluctuating back and forth and it was running rich. So let's go ahead and pull the intake manifold off. A few things need to come out of the way. We need to get this wire harness out of the way here. So we'll disconnect all the fuel injectors, disconnect the crankcase vent, disconnect the vacuum line, and tuck it out of the way. Now the throttle body actually has engine coolant running to it to help the throttle body stay warm. So I'm just going to disconnect the throttle body from the intake manifold so I don't have to lose any coolant. So let's remove the air intake duct. Tuck it out of the way. Then take a size 12 socket. Remove the nuts holding the throttle body to the intake manifold. Now there are 2 nuts on the top of the throttle body and 2 bolts on the bottom. And using an extension and the same deep well 12mm socket, remove all the bolts and nuts that hold the intake manifold in place. Now there's a small little vacuum line right behind the throttle body that needs to be taken off. Most likely it'll just slide off as you remove the intake manifold, but just remember to plug it back in after you put the intake manifold back on. Once all the nuts and bolts are removed, the intake manifold just slides right out. Piece of cake, just like that. This all took less than 15 minutes. And as you can see, here's the intake manifold gaskets. They're kind of smashed in. Not completely shot, but they're a little more brittle than I would like them to be. And they're going to leak eventually over time. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace this little gasket here, as well as this little gasket for the throttle body while we're at it. Now because the engine has been running lean for so long with these leaking intake manifold gaskets, we're going to go ahead and replace the spark plugs as well. They're right on top of the engine. It has coil on plug design, so they're easy to get to. Let's remove all the coils. Then remove all the spark plugs. As you can see, they're pretty worn and there's a decent gap on the plugs themselves. Now you remember earlier on in the video, cylinder number 1 is where we found the leak. Here's cylinder number 1. It has the largest gap. Cylinder number 2, not so much. Cylinder number 3, not so much. And cylinder number 4, not so much either. So we know for sure that cylinder number 1 was running the most lean by far. Then using the same brake clean that you used to find the leak, clean off the surfaces of the cylinder head. That way you have a nice clean surface for your new gasket to seal on. Now the other thing I'm going to do while I'm waiting for parts to show up is change the oil and filter on it. So let's go ahead and raise the vehicle up. You'll need a size 14 wrench to remove the engine oil drain plug. Up tugs and then off it comes. And the filter was pretty easy to get off this one because it was only on hand tight. And don't forget the little vacuum line behind the throttle body. There we go. Now, unfortunately, one of the little bitty plastic brittle wire harness retainers like you see here broke off. So plastic, what do you expect? It gets brittle and it breaks, so weight reduction. Okay, all the repair work is done. We'll go ahead and clear the codes here with the scan tool. Start it up. Take a look at some live data. Everything appears to be running smoothly. So you can see the fuel trims there are much better. Previously, when I looked at these while the engine was misfiring when cold, it was in the 20s. So that's a little bit more like it. Let's look at the oxygen sensor readings. Everything looks good there. No code set. We should be good to go. And I will now satisfy the YouTube audience by closing the door and stopping the ignition chime. You're welcome. How's the oil look? Is that right at the full mark? It sure is. Wow. Today's my lucky day, I guess. It's exactly at the full mark. That's perfect.